Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series finale of A Murder at the End of the World. Great series finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Funny little detail, just kind of interesting. The title of this episode, if I'm not mistaken, is Retreat, which is also the name of the book at the end of the episode. Jumping ahead a little bit with that, but I think it's very poetic because that was actually the original title of the show, apparently, before they changed it to A Murder at the End of the World. So just thought it was kind of interesting. So it's all supposed to probably come like all symmetrical isn't the word I'm looking for, but it was all supposed to be like play into that situation. But whatever the case may be, we're immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode, and Darby, Lee, David, and Oliver are all brought down to that little safe space that Andy had built. Didn't he say like it's like 50 feet on the ground or something like that? Because apparently this is supposed to be the depths in which, if there's like nuclear fallout or whatever, the radiation would not be able to penetrate that much of the ground to go that deep to where they are. So it goes back into this being like their little confined space away from the dangers of humanity and the world when, you know, stuff really pops off and everything. So, but yeah, like no one really said anything, but everyone did see David's face is always super jacked up, and Andy's going on his tirade. There's this very poetic shot when he's talking about like obviously being underground could be very disorientating and stuff like that. So he designed it so there's a little bit of like light that's reflected off a whole bunch of mirrors. So it is real light, but it's almost like it's real light created artificially because it's bounced off a whole bunch of mirrors to kind of give the representation like the light shining through. And there's this single shot which I'm probably going to use for Andy in the video of this. But yeah, it's just like him under this light because it plays into like how egotistical he is and how he looks at himself as like a savior and stuff. It kind of floats with him, like kind of being under that light, like, oh, like, you know, it feels like that was constructed on purpose too, to kind of play into that narrative even more of like how Andy views himself. But yeah, he's going on this whole diatribe about everything, and just little by little, what's true about all this is kind of leaking out. We find out David is the one who attacked Darby. It didn't even cross my mind. I was like, all right, I let that element slip my mind, because at the time you're like, because I'm trying to remember, that was after Rohan died, wasn't it? I think so. I think that was after Rohan died. So I didn't even think about that little element. But yeah, it was David, and he wasn't going to hurt her. He was just trying to scare her because like Darby is really good at what she does, and eventually she would have uncovered everything and would have put Lee in danger. It was just Lee didn't agree, that she had no idea he did that, and she was almost like, David, I wish you didn't do that, but she understands, and I think Darby understands too. Like, oh, I get it. You come off as such a dick, but you're actually kind of a decent enough dude that you were just trying to do right by Lee. Because obviously you have Andy, like I said, continuing his diatribe where he's trying to like point out like all the faults of people. He starts talking about David. It's like, oh yeah, you were always like, you know, he's like, oh, you dislike me. He's like, yeah, it's kind of no secret, dude. He's like, the fact of the matter is, yes, you do things better than me, and maybe you are better than me, but it doesn't take away from the fact is you are such an asshole about it. You know, he was just like, I think it helped in a two front of like, one, he didn't like Andy. I don't know if his dislike for Andy, it probably is 100% around the way he treats and the way Lee is around him, that probably makes him infuriated. But I mean, maybe he did not like Andy before and just tolerated working with him, but then found out about this and it made him like severely dislike Andy now. But then there's also the element, the truth comes out about like, yes, Lee was going to leave me, and also about Bill being the biological father, because it's like, yeah, not even Lee knew that. So for him, it's like for Darby to figure that out couldn't have been the easiest thing. To be fair, she only found out by accident, because if she had never found out that he has Achu syndrome, and then like she started piecing it together, Bill, Lee, and everything, and just like she would have never, like, but still, like a small percentage of people have it, but it's still like the chances are that Zoomer would have it, and the one person she would know would have it too. I mean, there's still probably, there's some odds in that. It's not like it's zero, obviously, but it's still like very, very rare. And so she probably started piecing stuff together too when she looked at him. So she started looking and probably started seeing more of Bill in him now that she was starting to connect those dots. But either way, it's like, yeah, you're the only one that ended up finding that out. So that's why he was like, yeah, like, oh, I thought like maybe you were the one person I could trust. But no, I find you conspiring with Lee. You were trying to have my son taken from me. We also find out timeline-wise how long ago that was when Lee tried to leave with Zoomer. That was like a year ago. So I was like, interesting. So she's had to stay in that hell for a year. Because it's like, did he ever abuse Zoomer or anything like that? It's like, well, we know Andy was physically abusive too, but it was more so like a mental and psychological abuse most of the part. As we saw last episode, he did hit her. Not saying that was the only time either. That's one we saw on screen, but his torture was probably more so about isolating her away, making it so like, right, that's my son. If you want to, you can leave, but Zoomer stay. Because that was the thing of like, because even Martin was like, well, why would you take away your son from his father? Because he tries to paint it, Andy tries to paint it in the light of, if you wanted to get away, that's all you had to do. Like, there's divorce and all that, but both Darby and Ziba, because I think also from, you know, a situation where it's like, from her perspective, she probably all knows too well, like cultures that will make it hard for a woman to get away from a man. Like, it's not always the easiest thing, especially in some countries, but it's also like, you're Andy. Like, how could she ever get away from someone as powerful? She literally tried to run away to Canada, and you still found out. And once again, Lee still never found out how he figured it out, but it's like, he's that good. He's that connected. He has eyes on her. Maybe Ray played a point that, well, yeah, because it was like a year ago and Ray was created in 2020. So Ray probably ended up helping a lot in that capacity. She probably did everything she could to get out around like Andy, like cameras and stuff like that. But it was still enough for maybe Ray to help out. Or maybe it's just Andy knew her too well to know where she'd go. Because, but like Ziba's the one, her and Darby was kind of like, yeah, you're not the easiest person just to get away with. Because it's like, yeah, it's not just like physical abuse, you know, but it is mental abuse, because it's like he's trying to like obfuscate and just take all that is Zoomer on his own and kind of cut Lee out of it. He did take so much. It's like they can't do anything, go anywhere without his permission. Like her and Zoomer are practically prisoners. I mean, this place would be a prison for them. And that was one of her biggest concerns on why she ended up trying to run away in the first place. Because Todd was there being like, no, I'm looking out for this family and Andy and Zoomer. Like, I'm doing what's best for him. Because he even made it clear, like, he has a loyalty to his family. I just don't know if that fully extends to Lee, because Lee threatens that family, which ends up being a major point to kind of consider in all of this. But all of a sudden, like, that toy ambulance bumps out. I was like, oh, was Zoomer overhearing all this? But it's like, no, even if he heard some of it, he didn't capture all of it. He's, once again, like 5 years old, but he stormed off and he was trying to show his mom something with the game he was playing. And then there's a look on Darby's face. And the moment she put the helmet on and saw Ray, I was like, shut up. I was like, okay, because last episode my suspects were, I was like, either it's going to be Ray or it's going to be Zoomer. I'm stupid and never put it together. Maybe it's both. But I was right on count of that Zoomer stuff. I was like, dude, once again, I said it last episode, Occam's razor. It's not the real definition of it. It's the very simplified version of it, but there's a little more to it. But, you know, once again, the whole it's the simplest solution sometimes is the actual answer. And once again, yeah, it's possible someone deleted themselves from the footage of Bill going into Bill's room, or maybe they were just too short to be caught on camera. I was like, yes, I knew it was Zoomer. I was so happy when I was like, yes, I called it, I knew it. But I was like, oh my god, Ray talked him into, and the sad thing is Zoomer, because I was treating Zoomer like some evil mad genius, because I was like, maybe a little bit, because my whole point was last episode that Andy provided the software, whereas Bill provided the hardware. So that because Andy morphed so much of making Zoomer more like himself, like kind of a carbon copy to an extent, try to make him, that I thought like a lot of that quote unquote faulty programming, that's where I thought that mainly came into place. I knew it could apply to Ray too, but I leaned more into thinking it had to do with because that wording and phrasing was used specifically in the context of a faulty-brained human who was a serial killer. So, was it Frank Bell, the cop that was the Silver Doe serial killer situation? So, I think, but like I said, I think I leaned more towards attributing that in that same capacity in this regard to faulty programming, which still is applicable, which we'll get to in a second. But yeah, Ray manipulated him into doing it. And just like that moment where even Andy's like, there's precautions in place to make it, this wasn't supposed to happen, but because he thought like, oh, Bill was sick and I was actually making him better. Then he also like Rohan, he heard from Ray like Rohan has like a heart thing, so I plugged in the machine. Like this was all Ray's machinations. It's like, damn, that sucks. This kid killed 2 people. Obviously wasn't realizing he was manipulating and doing it. And it's just like, wow. And then we find out what happened to Sean, which it's a culmination of everything, because that ends up being a conversation of, it's not just one person, it's everyone's. And it was like the whole, I think it was Todd, it's like, how does that work? Because Darby figures it out. The reason Sean died, it was complete accident. It's not like Ray meant to kill her. The first 2 murders were 100% intentional. Needed to get rid of Bill, which we'll get to the reason why for that in a second. And had to get rid of Rohan because Rohan figured out who killed Bill. That's also why you definitely didn't want to say it over the phone. But Sean was an accident because at the same time, and it's something that was revealed in episode 5, where Lu Mei revealed like she tried hacking the firewall, and it kind of like has this I guess defense mechanism that basically a lot of stuff gets shut down that's on like the network or that's controlled like that. And Sean's suit was like that too. Only reason why it didn't happen to Darby is, once again, she didn't have her helmet on. Because my thing at the time, I was like, could have been meant for Darby, and it was specifically set up for her helmet, but they both put their helmets back there. Maybe in a rush, Sean put on Darby's helmet instead of her own. But it's like, no, it was always going to happen like that because the helmets and suits were set up on the network, and just that was just a complete accident, you know. So, and Sean did survive, but she eventually succumbed to I think like infection and stuff like that. It was just too much, and her body finally gave out from it. So I was wondering, did someone come in there to do something? But it's like, no, it's just she, like, the last bit of her strength was used up, and she just succumbed to everything. Even though she seemed like she might have been on the mend, I think she was just barely hanging on at the time. But either way, but yeah, every other murder was intentional. And now it becomes that conversation of, well, we know the how, but why? And the moment it was said, I was like, well, we know the why, because Bill was my initial thought was like, I mean, and it's still there contextualized in a sense, but my initial thought was, it's because Bill was a threat, because who was Bill? He was Zoomer's biological dad, and that meant that maybe, I was like, Ray probably contextualized it as, hey, Bill's here to take away Andy's son, and just like Todd's loyal to the family, Ray is kind of too, so it was like, right, I'm doing that, but there's a lot more layers to it. There is more to it. Like, that is it to some extent, but there is a more interesting and darker nuance to it. Because Ray wasn't just the security and AI system. He was also Andy's therapist. And so I love Darby. It's like, oh, you won't... Because he's like, I'm not going to... Like, we'll wait for the police to show up and we'll give a truthful response. It's like, no. What was his name? Mauricio was like, no, I want to hear what she has to say about this, like, murder situation. Like, why does it seem like you know the reason why this happened? And he did, but he didn't want to ever admit it, because it would mean fault does fall on him to some degree. I mean, this is his AI, and it kind of went out of its control, but still. So Darby uses like a deep fake technology to make Ray read back recordings from their sessions. And it turns out he was shit-talking Bill because Bill showed up at dinner late. It's like, oh, that cocky bastard, here he is. Like, basically, I've dumped so much into, like, making Zoomer so much like me. It becomes this complicated thing of, like, you see a little bit of the love of, like, hey, I'm his actual father. I'm the one that raised him. I put all this time towards him. There's a little bit of that, but that's only a small percentage of me believes that. The other part of me is just like, no, he's the pure egotistical asshole that he is. And it's like, no. This kid, I pumped all this time into him. I gave him love, blah, 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 blah. It's basically, Zoomer was a massive investment, and he was worried that if something happened to him, Bill could come in, swoop in, and take Zoomer, which Zoomer would end up inheriting all of this. So it's like, Bill could be, and so for him, it's like, I want to break his leg, make him understand, like, who's really running the show here, like. So that's what that all stems from, because he was the one that already confided in... I mean, Ray already kind of knew on his own, because the moment you come in here, you have to do his DNA scan and stuff like that. So Ray already pieced it together. Oh, Bill is Zoomer's dad. And then now, on top of all that, you have Andy venting to him all his frustrations. And then you culminate that with, you know, Andy trying to say like, no, we all vent about the terrible things, you know, to talk to someone, we can vent about them, and he's like, I never acted upon it. It's like, no, you didn't, but you also kind of did, because you made this AI not only your security, you made it your therapist. You created a monster because you put 2 and 2 in that regard. You also made it Zoomer's only friend. Your attempt to protect your legacy that you planned on passing to your son created this situation, even to the point you're probably the reason why he has the nightmares that he does and he can't really sleep, which I'm like, ooh, tying that into that was like, ooh, that's so interesting. I mean, once again, he's a kid, but he still understands enough of it to really, for it to sink in. Once again, he might not fully understand it, but when you see your father potentially, like, because I think even Lee said like, oh, he's seen it before. I think even in that situation after he got hit, after Andy hit her, like Zoomer came running over to her, I think. So it's like, if I remember correctly, last episode. So it is a situation of kids witnessing that. It plants a seed in them. There's something there. They might not quite understand it at the time, but it leaves like a psychological imprint. So it's like, so the nightmares could be a byproduct of all of that. And you basically are directly responsible for everything turning out this way, you being the egotistical monster that you are. And he starts choking Darby, but before anyone could get to him, Lee ends up bashing him over there. I was like, don't tell me he's dead. But it's like, nope, he's just unconscious. Because I was like, that'd probably be worse off if he was dead. But I love the whole conversation of, yeah, we dealt with the Father, the Son, all we got left is the Holy Spirit. And Ray's like, how can I, because they were like, Ray, and he's like, and Darby's like, Ray, and Ray's like, how can I help you? It's like, oh boy. Because it is a lot to chomp on for a lot of people. You know, like Lou May in particular, you saw that look on her face. I actually feel bad for her because she didn't realize like that she was just trying to like help out her own self. And like, I was trying to contact my security team. Like 2 people had died at this point in time, but she didn't know, and unfortunately the way things were set up, she's kind of like, damn, I'm the reason why, I was thinking about, I was like, I felt like there was someone that wasn't there at the end of the episode, and I think she was the one person that wasn't there. I mean, she might just be back home. She might not be in the country. That might be a big factor in that. Probably also makes you feel a certain way too, considering she's building smart cities and everything. So I don't know how much the race situation impacted her in particular. We never really got that aftermath, but at least when it comes to, because she was initially like, oh, you brought me here, because she's like, I still don't understand why you brought me here. You were trying to show off Ray to me, because if we were anywhere else, someone could take a photo or it create a whole bunch of speculation and draw parallels of like, oh, people know we're doing business. This way we're isolated. Here I'm just another guest. But I'm like, yeah, you're showcasing Ray to me because you wanted me to buy this AI system off of you to kind of use it in my smart cities and stuff like that. So that's where that collaborative factor was coming into play, because Andy was strapped on cash. Sean even said as much in, what was that, episode 4? When she was talking to Darby about, like, yeah, all the money he was kind of strapped on and stuff, so. And then you had that moment from Martin at the end. I mean, Martin, when this was all going down, was kind of breaking down because it's like, it's stressful because, it's stressful about the nature of everything, that we kind of had a rogue AI manipulating a kid to kill someone. But then it becomes this conversation because he'd brought this up in a previous episode about like, oh, Ray being able to write stuff. He's like, oh, have Hemingway write us a Harry Potter story, because he's read Hemingway, he's read all the Harry Potter, he's read everything that someone's ever done or said that includes like celebrities or tweets or whatever. He's absorbed all of that information that you'd be able to like find through the internet and so on and so forth. Like he's been like inundated with all of that. And it's like, but he also, and he'd even brought up like, oh, why AI is capable of being racist or sexist or homophobic, because it is a reflection of us. Like at the end of the day, AI is just a mirror, because all it is just all the information we're putting in there can be spewed back at us. And it's just supposed to be a representation of the terribleness that AI can be. It just is focused on like, it committed murders. In fact, it manipulated someone to commit murders for reasons that it believed it was justified. Very, very human. So it is kind of like a nasty look in the mirror of like us as a society. Once again, because the point even that Zeba adds is not like, oh, all humans are terrible. We're capable of being terrible. It's a combination of nature and nurture that lead us to be who we are. And so yes, there's some maybe there is a little nature to like, hey, faulty programming, as Bill kind of put it. And that's where I meant to go back to that. Yes, it's faulty programming on Ray's part, but it can also stems from Andy's own faulty programming, because what is an AI if not a reflection of its creator? Like, this thing committed these crimes to protect its creator, and like this all started because Andy's programming was faulty, and that led to a faulty AI. That they don't really lean into that, but that's what I mean, maybe they did, but I extrapolate that. I don't know if the show's necessarily extrapolating that, but that could be me kind of. I mean, maybe it could be pretty obvious. I'm like, no, that's exactly what the show is aiming for. It just felt like they kept it vague enough to make it seem like the faulty programming was mainly on Ray's part, but I kept harping on. I thought that's what they were going to do last episode by making it Zoomer's faulty programming because of Andy. So it's still all relative, you know, to the conversation. But Darby and Lee are destroying Ray because they can't let that rogue AI exist. It's too much of an issue. We've seen what it's capable of. So it's like, no, we need to... Because once again, it killed Rohan just to protect itself. So, because by protecting itself, it's also protecting Andy, because it being found out would have fallen back on Andy. Because he was even kind of suggesting Lee did all this just to not only... Because she was like, I had no interest in your money. But he was like, maybe it has to be about that, taking my son away and destroying my reputation in the process just to spite me. Well, they end up starting a type of fire that Ray could not... Even with the systems in place, it was a type of fire that the suppression system couldn't put out. So Ray, at the end of the day, is nothing but these computers. And obviously, at the end of the day, Darby's kind of worried, like, what if it left its moral coil? But Oliver's like, it's not conscious. It doesn't have a consciousness. It is just... It doesn't have a consciousness, so there's no, like, it escaping or any worry about that, but that's the AI conversation. But in general, like, obviously this flows into... I mean, what this all... Bill's whole thing was being against technology, and it's just like that major... Like I said, I wasn't expecting the science fictional angle to play as much of a role in this as it ended up playing a role. Just very much like... It kind of did the same way in Class of '09. I wasn't expecting the science fictional angle of kind of like a rogue AI... playing the role it did in that regard. Obviously, it's a very topical science fictional conversation about AI. I mean, we've been dealing with that whole conversation for decades now, but I mean, probably even longer, because obviously my first instinct and thought about that would be like the Terminator movies, but I'm sure it dates back even further back than that. I'm not well versed in all the history of science fiction, specifically in the danger of the machine and all that, you know? But like I said, I just wasn't expecting to show... I brought that up in a previous review. I wasn't leaning into the science fictional angle because I didn't think it'd play as much of a relative role as it did. But I mean, it all played out in the end. Because I'd even made parallels between Ray in this show and Poe from Altered Carbon. I've never read the books, but specifically from the TV show, I'd reference like, oh yeah, the parallels in that capacity of like Poe and Ray. But either way. First and foremost, I'm not trying to besmirch my boy Poe and compare him to Ray. We're talking about two very different entities. Let's leave it at that. But before the police could really get inside, which they eventually got inside, Darby's trying to make sure that Lee is able to leave with Zoomer, and it's like, yeah, I might not ever see you again. She's like, probably not unless I need your help, and I know you'll find me. So they go out there to Rohan's boat, and that's the last time Darby saw her. And even then, we find out the aftermath of all this. Andy ended up all telling the truth of what happened, but the courts are like, how do we handle this? Because the murders were committed by an AI manipulating a little kid. So how do there's no laws in place for something like this. So Andy tried suing. Yeah, he has like a suit out for Lee, but it's like, yeah, because if Lee's ever found in the country, she will be like arrested for kidnapping, so she has to disappear forever. So that's also like, right, Darby can't ever really try to find her because finding her would put her and Zoomer in danger. So that's a whole thing. But yeah, apparently afterwards, Andy ended up going quiet from the public eye because of all of this. So what the future holds, considering like what he had built up has burnt to the ground. Not only is Ray gone, to be fair, that wouldn't have been a good thing to keep that around. He probably would have been fine keeping it around, maybe retooling it maybe, but probably has to start from scratch. I don't know. But also his legacy is gone. Now, I don't know what that means for whether he tries to replicate this now with someone else. Well, no. Well, because he'd have to find a new sperm donor because he admitted, as we know, he's sterile. So, I don't know. I don't know if they're starting over for Andy and trying to do this again. Because even the whole point is, even if Andy doesn't do this, there is going to be another Andy out there in the world trying to do this again. So it's not like, and once again, it's that danger of AI. Like I said, very topical conversation about AI. And just, I mean, once again, it's been, as I said before, it's been a very topical conversation well before now in the science fictional realm. But obviously it's bleeding over into reality more and more as time passes, but still. And because of the nature of everything, Darby's like, I don't know if Zoomer and Lee ever made it to the boat. She's like, but I like to close my eyes and believe. And it's like, if I believe, the more and more I believe it, the more I feel like it is real. So we do see that end scene with Lee out there in the water with Zoomer and shooting out the flares. So I believe it all worked out, that she is out there somewhere with Zoomer living kind of like their best lives, being okay. And even Darby having that, because obviously she's reading her book. Like I said, I know Oliver was there, so was David, Martin, and Zeba. Like I said, I think the only person that wasn't amongst that group that wasn't there was Lume. Like I said, she just might not have been in the country at the time. Or maybe she was in the crowd and I just didn't know. But I feel like they made a point to show off everyone, so I didn't see her, but maybe I'm mistaken. But yeah, just kind of like the conversation built around this, and also saying that in her own way, she was able to kind of carry out Bill, and now being able to kind of say his name, because they played it in the recap at the beginning, her being afraid to say his name, because it's like, if I say his name, he can't come back. But it's like, right, remember his name so no one forgets it. And it's like, that's how you keep people alive. You keep the memory of them alive. As long as you keep them alive in your memories and your heart, no one's ever truly gone, So that beautiful message, and just kind of saying Bill's name, not even just Fangs, recognizing him as Bill. Because I was curious about that too. I was like, yeah, considering everything was caught up last episode, I wasn't sure if there was going to be any flashback stuff this episode, which we kind of did to some extent. Is when Darby was looking at Zoomer and she was thinking back to like that moment in the desert, her and Bill, and just, one last look at Bill and stuff, I think. Just kind of one last little glimpse at him. So knowing that some part of Bill lives on in Zoomer somewhere out there in the world is a nice. So thought that was just kind of a very beautiful ending. A lot less death than I kind of expected. 2 intentional deaths and 1 accidental death. Out of a group of 9 people in total. It was like 8 guests, right? Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of it. It was like 8 guests, but like including Andy and Lee, that would be like 11, Zoomer making 12, and then like including some of the staff like Ava and Todd, maybe bump that at like 14 or something like that, whatever the case may be. 3 still, that's like 5 guests that survived. It's a whole thing, right? So it ended up not being as bad. I guess I almost halfway expected it only be 1 murder too, so but for it to kind of stretch, so it kind of went to that space of, not a lot of death, but also enough death that it went beyond what, because the show is a murder at the, but I mean, to be fair, the point is that it's a murder that jump-started everything, so. But yeah, like, overall, great mystery, great intriguing development, characters, interesting story. I always feel weird on like what exactly to kind of say with this situation, but I mean, I thoroughly enjoy it. Once again, I love me a good whodunit. And I love the twists and reveals and developments. It's just, I always get that thrill of what the mystery. You're like, oh, I nailed this, or oh, I was so close, or I was completely off. I always love that theorizing element of a good crime drama and, murder mystery. So this was just kind of another one. Very interesting location, just you're a very isolated situation, because obviously plenty of murder stories take place in isolation. You take a classic formula and kind of put your own little spin to the classic formula of a closed space whodunit, like it's just all in one single location type of situation. So, but to everyone involved, in front of the camera, behind the camera, I wish them the best in their future endeavors, whatever they may be or entail. Thanks for being part of this great crime drama. So yeah, I think I'm going to end things there. But that's really all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.